right, everyone, you already know. What is it? Oh, man, tell us, what is it? You know, it is the best hour of your week. Oh, and a little harpsichord there for you. Yeah, it's the best hour of your week. Let me go ahead and switch to my real camera here. Okay, we've got a phantom. There's a ghost in the machine because I didn't do that one. Look, Ma, no hands. Sometimes it just does its own thing. But we're going to have a great time today, as we always do. 45 degrees in Kitsap County. It is 102. I want to thank you for joining us today. This is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. So, you already know what time it is. Wow, I don't know why that wants to do that today. It's just doing its thing. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kids of all ages, I bring to you now to the stage Mark Boatwright Frost.
I am really going to have to start wearing a clown nose for this.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Kind of catching up with everything. And, it's 45 degrees here. How come it feels colder than when it's 30?
Mm, you know what? That is so interesting. I was in Seattle for a conference and it was sunny and I was just wearing my sweater. It was warm and it was, what, 32? Uh, it was really bizarre. And maybe it was the sun, but I figured being on the waterfront, I would, feel the wind and the chill, but I didn't. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Got my
Absolutely.
window cracked a little bit, Hideo, and I'm like freezing my rear end off. Matter of fact, hang tight, folks. I'm turning the heat up.
All
But
right.
that's tipping points and puzzle pieces. We're going to be turning the heat up.
I see what you did there. Boom, boom. I don't think
All
I have.
right.
Oh, I do. So, what do you got in store for us today?
So we're going to be talking about it being really cold outside, which is kind of how we started this whole thing, and about the feeling of cold and turning up the heat. And as you know, I've been doing a lot of driving for G2, and we've been doing a lot of the cold weather shelter stuff. And a couple questions came to my mind that I've been given answers to that make me kind of like scratch my head. But I note that there are four churches that we take everybody to. And I got a story to tell you from about 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
Ooh.
And 8 or 9 years ago, I was affiliated more closely with the Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship and with St. Paul's Methodist Church. And they both took in homeless folks for the nights and prepared food for them. And I think St. Paul still has a soup kitchen that they feed people at regularly. Um, but there are now four churches. And that started me thinking, how I do. I started asking questions and I started thinking about why are there only four churches now when there were so many more involved in this 7 or 8 years ago? And I started thinking, well, maybe it's fatigue because we were doing an emergency solving the homelessness problem, giving them places to stay, feeding them, and then maybe people started getting tired because that didn't go away; it just kept getting worse. And then maybe resources started to dry up, and then COVID happened, and so it started bringing me around to like, what is really going on here? Why is it that so few faith-based organizations with real facilities are participating in this? I mean, the county's doing as good a job as they can possibly do, but why are there so few people stepping up to help with this? And then I found this chart. And Marwan, can you put that chart up?
Absolutely.
So this is the last since 1940 church membership, and this is not only Christian churches, though. It includes a great many more Christian churches. It's synagogues and it's mosques, and it basically shows that overall faith participation has been dropping for decades. And that means it's true that the churches just don't have the resources they once did. And if there, I have a link to the article you can put into the chat there. And part of the link to, part of the thing about the article is that churchgoers are aging out. The younger people aren't participating in church, whatever form that church or belief takes. So we're depending on a resource that is in trouble,
Hey,
dwindling.
Mark, if you
Yeah.
don't mind,
Yep.
for those that
Please.
are just listening and can't see, the graph that's up is it says church membership among U.S. adults now below 50%. And so this was from Gallup, based
Mhm.
on annual aggregated data, usually based on two surveys. And in the 40s, it was 73%. We got a spike in 45. What might have precipitated that, Mark?
World War II.
All right, that makes sense, right? And then went back to 73 through the 50s and through the 60s. And then you started to see a little decline in the 70s. And then a sharp, well, it's a pretty significant decline. I would say, 3 points is significant in 85 to 90 ish. And then it kind of fell off the cliff right around what, 1998, 1999.
Yep. It
And
had a
then,
little spike. It had a little spike around 2000,
yeah,
and then it's been dropping steadily since then.
so maybe Y2K and was
Yeah.
the end of the world, and well, it didn't end. So, and I mean, it goes off a cliff if you're looking at this chart here. I mean, to go from 70 to 47 is
In 20 years.
wow. Wow, wow, wow. Mass, thank you for this chart, by the way.
And so, yeah, and so we're looking at the fact that the churches, there are fewer and fewer churches participating in supporting the homeless, the cold weather shelters and severe weather shelters. And I think the numbers, I'm not an expert, and there are a lot more questions to be answered, and a lot more information to be gotten. But this shows right here that their resources are dwindling, and it's really
Mhm.
hard for them to step up. So the question is, what can we do to solve this the resource need here? Can we find ways to ask parishioners to talk to their church to see if there's some way that they can participate and provide space? I don't know, but this is it's puzzling to me that there's one church in each area that we drive people to.
You know what's interesting, Mark? This one is in my wheelhouse here. You hit
Okay.
me in the feels today. Uh, for me, one of the things that I noticed was COVID was brutal on
Hmm.
religious institutions, just brutal. So before COVID hit, folks could go to your local church. It didn't matter if you were a member or not, and get a gas card, maybe get put up in a motel or a hotel for the night, and they were taxed also, right? Uh, and that was a huge issue. But
Yep.
looking at this graph, you have to acknowledge, hey, there was that 50% pre-COVID. So,
Yeah.
it dropped down more than that. And you would think maybe there would be a bump because of COVID, and there wasn't. So you got
No.
World War II, you've got the turn of the century, and you see a little, a spike. But, COVID didn't do that. Uh, and so that really, to me, goes to the state that we find ourselves in now, and it's very concerning. But the resources were already finite, but even more so now. So it makes it tremendously difficult for organizations, religious institutions to support. Right?
Absolutely. And I want to go back to a show we did about 15, 15, 16 shows ago, where we were
Mhm.
talking about the resources for nonprofits, and that for all of the GDP, 4% of both finances and people are nonprofits. And if nonprofits and churches are supposed to help um, dress with the failure of the system to support people, we're undermanned by rather a lot, and underfunded by a lot. And the churches are in I don't want to say they're in a world of hurt, because that's not where I want to go with this, but they are certainly losing resources and people, and they're aging out, and the people are aging out.
I'll say they're in the world of hurt. And it's unfortunate, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Especially for me in the Black community. That was the cornerstone of the Black community, and to see these numbers, I don't think bodes well overall, right? Because that was our community center. It was our everything. It was our child care. It was our mentorship. It was place of worship. It was a school. It could be the credit union, right? It literally did everything.
yep,
And now with the eroded connection and these numbers continuing to go down as they lose generations and the longtime members are dying off, what is the future state of the church?
yeah. And I have had conversations with several ministers in the last few years, and I asked them about how they're going to address the relevancy of the church to attract members.
Oof.
And they don't want to step outside the box and look at how to make it more relevant to people. And this is personal opinion. I'm not putting this on Marwan or the show, but I wonder if a lot of the religious hate mongering that's been happening on the far right over the few years is turning people away from the church because it has nothing to do with religion.
That's possible. I guess my only thought on that is we're a pretty sophisticated country, and there's so many different denominations, and it's across the board, right?
It
So it's
is.
not just Southern evangelicals. It's Pacific Northwest Baptist and
Yeah.
Northeast Church in God in Christ. It's
It's
our
your local
Protestant.
synagogue. It's your local synagogue. It's your local mosque. It's all of
Yeah,
it.
it's across the board.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. We're looking at a world where homelessness is increasing, where the economic trials are greater and greater. We've talked several times about no control on the rent, no control on capitalism or greed, no control on things that humans need. I mean, Nestle has been pumping water for bottles out of the middle of California, who's already water challenged for decades because they have a contract with a tribe down there to pump water out, and they said that the CEO of Nestle, and this is a paraphrase because I don't remember the direct quote, though if you want me to, I will at some point in the future dig up the link to it, where he actually said that water is not a right.
Mm,
Water is a commodity to be bought and sold.
wow, water is not a right.
Yeah, so let's talk about let's talk about the 4 or 5 things that people need to survive. We need water because let's be honest, without water, you last 2 to 3 days, period. You're done. Doesn't matter who you are. 2 to 3 days is all we can go without water. We need food, and you can't have food without, water. We need shelter. We need companionship. These are things that humans need.
Companionship is number four.
Well, I'm saying companionship because humans are wired for community and companionship. And think of how much money is made on selling the idea of love and companionship in this country. I think it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of Valentine's Day because it's like commercial hell. And I pity the poor fool who
I pity the
buys in.
fool.
Yeah, I pity the fool. I can't even do that. That buys into that crap because he has an expectation set that he can't possibly meet.
I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the whole thing with diamond rings is very contemporary, and that was
Mhm.
pushed forward by De Beers, and now that is the standard, right? You got to buy
Yeah.
this big diamond ring, and it's been so commercialized and capitalism at its worst, of course.
Yep. And
But I would say to you, Mark, that it's the opposite. I don't think you know whoever they is selling that anymore. I think they're selling even more individuality, right? Um, they have dismantled the traditional family. Hey, focus on your career. You can have children later and later. You don't even need to be in a relationship to have a child. I think you see that tremendously now more. And I think all these things go to, just to separate us, right? The Rev and I did a show, individualism versus collectivism. And, collectivism is where it's at. We're not going to be able to do this alone.
we're wired for it,
Yeah.
but we're programmed against it. So here's another little historical factoid for you, and this ties into homelessness to a great degree. Coming out of World War II, we had a tax base that taxed the corporations rather heavily, up to 90% of their profits, and created an environment in this country that everybody looks at as the golden age, but they don't talk about the taxation that created the golden age. And people could buy a home, have a family. You could have the man going out and making the living, the woman staying home. And I'm not making any cultural judgments on this. I'm just saying the way it was. And then in the 70s, things started changing with the financial institutions so that it required two people's income in order to buy a home. And that started what is now the trend we see about how you buy a home, and started artificially inflating the house prices so that greater profits could be made on each one of them. And everything to this point is built from the 1970s when that model shifted, because they saw an opportunity where people were making enough money to live and to thrive and to raise their families. And this is the last time we had like the family unit. And then we started making it so both people had to work in order to have that lifestyle. And then more and more and more, and it just kept cascading until here we are. And the real estate market is collapsing because it's been artificially inflated for decades. And now people are becoming homeless because they can't afford to live in a home. There's a fairly sizable number of homeless people that work every day, but they can't afford to live. They can't afford to get a place to live.
Absolutely.
So, here we are creating this situation. And again, the county has stepped up and done a whole bunch to it. Where are the cities? And this is going to be the number two punch of the 1-2 punch I had today. Said, I asked where I looked at the shelters and I'm going, okay, so there's Silverdale, there's Poulsbo, there's Port Orchard, there's Kingston. Bremerton is the largest city in Kitsap County, has the largest population and the largest homeless population, yet they don't have a cold weather shelter. And I asked about this and they said, well, the Salvation Army is a cold weather shelter. And I stepped back and I said, but they don't take anybody in during severe weather. Are there no churches in Bremerton that can be designated? I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not casting aspersion here, but the question is, where are the cities in all this? The county stepped up. The churches have stepped up. Where are the cities?
Well, one thing I'll say is I encourage everyone to tune in next week for our conversation, our deep dive. We do that every second Wednesday. The county's housing, I don't know what her title is. Let's call her the housing manager, the housing czar. Kirsten Jewell will be on, and we're going to go into a deep dive on that, and also encourage people to become volunteers for them and or their churches, and put out basically a call, to try to recruit, because it is needed.
Absolutely. Go to your church board. Go to your minister. Talk to them about where they are and stepping up, because a lot of the churches in this area, and again, not casting any aspersions, but I drive by Grace Point all the time, and they have this huge facility. St. Paul's has got the kitchen down below, and was housing people. There are lots of churches with room and facilities. Talk to your minister about it. See what you can do. See if you can coordinate with other churches for volunteers. This is a problem that isn't going to go away. And let's get back to the point of this is these are human beings. A lot of these people are working every day trying to get by and trying to build something and trying to stay sober and stay, not crazy, and trying to rejoin society. But there's just all the roadblocks in front of them to keep them from doing that. And to be honest, a lot of people become homeless without being junkies or without being crazy, but it's hard to stay clean when you're suddenly lost everything and nothing is moving forward for you. It's hard and they need help. And what are we
Well, what
going
I
to
would
do?
say, let me jump in there just really quick
Yeah.
and cut you off on there. Uh,
Yeah. Cut me off. There we are.
no, it's to support what you're saying. I was talking to my back surgeon, and he's getting ready to put the needles in my back. I just got my IV put in, and he's like, so I know you do work with that community, and so is it true that most of the folks that are homeless are drug addicts and alcoholics? And it's like, no, actually, it's not. And I'll pull up the point in time count, just to kind of show you that is indeed not the case. But what Mark was saying is absolutely right, right? Many of us are self-medicating now. Either, we're wine moms, or, whatever it is, we're using marijuana or other things to self-medicate. And, a lot of us are in, decent times, right? When you find yourself in that situation and you are struggling day in and day out, and there is no quick way out of it, and I mean quick way, I'm talking about months, maybe even years, right? It's not just a thing, oh, okay, go to work and everything is going to be okay, right? First, last, and deposit 3 times the average, the rent. Do you have good credit history? Do you have good history? Did you just come out of incarceration? Whatever the situation is, right? Are you all of a sudden disabled, right? Because your health failed.
Well,
Did you lose your
perm-
breadwinner?
let's throw permanent address in there, because a lot of the things I hear is I can't get the job because I don't have a permanent address.
Hmm. So, you can hold on for as long as you can, but eventually, right, your mental health is going to be in decline. And so everyone doesn't start off that way, but there's a good percentage of people that end up that way because of the situation they're in, and there is no off ramp. There's no quick off ramp, right? They just became homeless, but there's hundreds of people that were already homeless, right? So do I go into homelessness and then I get help first, or do you try to help the people that you're trying to move on? Right now, you've
Yep.
got rapid rehousing and some other things like that, and some other great programs. But again, they can only help so many people. So I just wanted to bolster your point there, because you're
Yeah, and there's so many,
100% on
and there's only so many houses available that are affordable. And go back again to other programs that Marwan and I have done, where we talked about, just doing the math on what $15 an hour will get you in today's market.
that. Quite laughable. Let me go ahead and pull this chart up
Okay.
here. As I was saying, and these stats should be on here. Let me just enlarge this. But this is the point in time count for 2022. So once a year, typically, volunteers go out and they pick a day, and they go and they try to count all of the unhoused, and they ask questions, right? So you can see the numbers here year over year, and defining sheltered versus unsheltered, emergency sheltered, abandoned buildings, living in an RV or a boat, living in their car, outdoors, just straight on the street, or transitional housing. You can see there, right? 2022, definitely higher than any other year, right? Total count 563. You can get down by city. Look at the Port Orchard, 23%. Bremerton, 43%. Yes, there are unhoused in Bainbridge Island, 9%. Hillsborough, 14, and Silverdale, 11. Right? Last place of residence, 80% of folks were in Kitsap County. Right? Very few have come from out of state or from other Washington counties like Mason County, King County, Pierce County. Now, here's what I wanted to bring your attention, right? The cause of homelessness. When asked about the specific cause or causes of homelessness, 106 unsheltered households, 66% responded. So basically, 2 out of every 3, right? And the most common response was health issues, including mental health, economic issues, loss of a job or unable to work, and housing issues, eviction or loss of housing. If you look, substance abuse is 25%, right? It's fifth on the chart. Health issues and mental health, 67%. We know we have an aging community. We know that we have a sick community. We have unaffordable health care. We don't have preventative health care, right? Uh, Job loss, unable to work. We know, hey, COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs. And as Mark was saying, hey, $15 an hour isn't going to cut it. Oh, there's no bus service on Sunday. You say, how do I get to work on Sunday? Oh, the bus stops running at 8:30. Well, I work at Applebee's and the buses stop running. How do I get home? How do I get there? I'm working swing shift, right? I don't have a car. I don't have, I don't have a driver's license. I don't
Well,
have friends.
there is G2.
Well, there is, but even with that, right? That's not a free service, so that's going to cost you also, right? Eviction, loss of housing, 40%. Family conflict, 35%. It is not until we get to substance abuse here at 25%. And again, people can click multiple, but 1 in 4. 1 in 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a misnomer that we have to continue to have a conversation about, right? And again, yeah, go ahead.
That's the message that gets pushed on us so that we write these people off and don't pay attention to them. Oh, they're just crazy drug addicts. We don't have to think about them as human beings.
And so
and they are human.
And I would say this. Here was the cause of homelessness. Now look over at the characteristics, the chart on the left, right? When asked about various personal characteristics, 113 unsheltered heads of household, 71% responded. So over here, 66 responded. We got 5 more percent to respond over here. The most common response from the survey participants was that they experienced challenges related to mental health, followed by chronic substance use. So my substance abuse wasn't an issue, right? It was non-existent. I didn't have a substance issue. I became homeless, and now I've got a chronic substance use because I can't get out of homelessness. And even then, that number only jumped up 7%. The numbers are important, folks. They really are. Mental health, number 1, and it's across the board, right? Permanent and physical disability. For me, I've got degenerative disc and joint disease. I suffer from sarcoidosis, which is a lung disease, right? I'm not going to be able to work forever. So if I can't work, how do I pay the rent? Chronic health conditions, right? That's me. Developmental disabilities, domestic violence. This is critical in telling the story. And this is, a super important reason to do the point time count. And they look for volunteers for this too. So stay tuned for that. We'll announce it as it comes up close because that usually happens, I believe, in January. So coming up. Go ahead, Mark. I just wanted to share that.
No, it's okay.
What you're
And
saying is
that's
spot
so
on.
important. Yeah, it's this whole thing that we other you. This is another form of othering. You've heard Marwan and I talk about this again and again and again. I think every bloody episode we talk about othering. We are othering people who 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago were just like us. We could be looking in the mirror. They're human beings who have fallen afoul of the system for one way or another, or actually, this is my opinion only, they have fallen afoul of our economy, which is not as healthy as the media would like you to believe. when the majority of jobs are $15 an hour, and someone around believes that the average median income for a four-person household in Kitsap County is $102,000 or $104,000 a year. I don't know many people making that, and I know a lot of people. So it's a problem that we can only resolve together. So sing it with us. We sing this choir every week. Let's get together. Let's determine what human commonalities are, and let's start addressing the needs. Because if we don't, we're one paycheck away from being just like everybody else in this that we've been discussing today. And baby, it's cold outside, and there aren't very many places to go, and they aren't always all that pleasant. And it's not because people aren't trying and people aren't working hard. It's because that you share it with people who've been in the system, been out of the system for a long time, and are just trying to get warm, but they've been on drugs for a while, or they are not stable as they could be. It's just the way it is, and we have to find a way to address it together.
Well, I think about, my situation. I don't suffer from anxiety, but you, a lot of folks may not go directly into homelessness. Maybe they go and they stay with a family member, right, or a friend, and you can wear that welcome out pretty quick, right? You're already not supposed to be on the list, and most people don't know people that own their own homes, right? Because
Hmm.
again, we are a renter county. We are not a home ownership county. So once that welcome is worn out, or you couldn't stay at all, now you're in your car, right? You still haven't been able to bounce back, and then you finally, uh, and you're already considered homeless at that point because you're couch surfing. So these are just different iterations of homelessness. And if you can't afford your medication, if you're suffering from anxiety, you know, do you try something? Do you drink because it's cheap? To try to cope. These things happen, and it's so easy to say, well, you should just pull yourself up from your bootstraps, and you should just be more mentally tough and durable, and yada yada yada. But it's just not the case.
But let's be honest, the people saying that would crumble if they face the same situation.
Well, a lot would, and
Yeah.
and for those that went through it, unfortunately, I have conversations with folks that say, "Hey, you know what? I was homeless, and I did this, and I did that," and they have this revisionist history
Hmm.
of not, acknowledging and recognizing all of the supports that were there for them to help stabilize them. Whether or not they had a grandparent or a parent that was watching their children, whether or not they got grants and scholarships above and beyond, in different situations, right? And so they don't remember all that, and they just, hey, I got it out the mud, right? They don't remember going to church and getting that support, right? That spiritual support, and not being alone. And all of
Yeah.
a
So
sudden, it's like I want to close the door behind
yeah,
everyone else because I did it.
yeah. So isn't that, and that's our culture? That's our toxic culture again. But
Mhm.
isn't that a form of mental illness, delusion?
Man, might be standard fare today.
Yeah, it might be. So here's the thing: are we people? Are we going to support our brother? I mean, I'm pretty sure that Christianity would say that we are our brother's keeper, that we are supposed to, you know, be the good Samaritan. And but we can't apparently depend on the churches because they are declining in membership, and membership is how they fund the church and all of the works the church does. So how do we solve this conundrum? How do we, and how do we get more participation from the cities and the people within the cities on a problem that's going to continue to grow until we address the economic causes for it, including, if you guys remember, the mortgage debacle of several years ago that put a lot of people on the streets that nobody ever seems to mention as
Hmm.
one of the causatives of homelessness.
Well, I think The churches themselves need to get and start to have a radical mindset, right? To take one out from Pastor Ellington there. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's great that all these wonderful organizations and churches do toy drives during the holidays, right? However, my philosophy and my viewpoint on this is, while it's great for that, child to have a baby doll or the Tonka truck or whatever it is, right? They need housing. They need stability. And we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars countywide, producing toys and gifts for families. When if we were to shift that money and get someone into a place, first, last, and deposit, out of all these people that are donating, is there a landlord in there that's willing to support that? You don't have to have a formal housing program for you to help house someone and then provide those supportive services to go alongside them. You're not KCR, you're not the Bremerton Housing Authority, you're not G2, but you know what? Your church, your organization, whatever it is, your cluster of friends, 4 or 5 of you are gonna love on this particular individual or family and help them to navigate and get themselves back to a space of self-sufficiency. So while I say, toys are important and they have their place, I think we have to prioritize these finite resources.
Shelter, food, water.
There you go.
Yeah. And so, prioritize by what humans need the most. As a, and our corporations, which again I think of as giant machines churning along, doing what they do, which is to maximize their profit for their shareholders. They think of commodities as profit centers, and we need to start changing our thinking to change their thinking, that they are not profit centers, they are requirements for life, for us, for them, for all the people that work for them. And we need to bring humanity back to the front and foremost of that thinking. There's also things that we need to sit down. I mean, y'all may be thinking that we need to sit with the calls that Marwan and I make for us all to sit down and bring our puzzle pieces to the table are just kind of an esoteric thought process that none of you need to focus on, or don't have time for. But here's some things. There are solutions out there, but the solutions have a lot of moving parts and they have a lot of dots that need to be connected. And we need to sit down and figure out how to connect those dots. There's been several movements here to get tiny homes to start housing, uh, first the homeless, people who are at risk of being homeless, to create an affordable housing solution for people. But there's no place to put them. There's no, I mean, no consistent money. There's no process. There's no process in place to make it work. And for that to happen, we have to bring both the will, but the understanding of how we can make this happen. Churches have a lot of parking lots. Maybe some of them could, put like 10 parking spaces to create, shelters for people, and start our own grassroots affordable housing or low income housing or homeless housing projects, to offset the real estate market. So we need to sit down and figure out how to connect those dots. And there are lots of different ways to make this happen, where there are lots of things that we can do to do this, but we have to do it together, because alone, one person singing the is going to get, ignored. But a choir is pretty united and pretty beautiful.
Facts. Well, and my stance on this, Mark, is, definitely an all of the above approach. But as you love to say, we the people,
Hmm.
unless folks that are thinking the way that we are thinking are not only voted into office but supported once they're there, we're not going to experience change. So if we have these tiny homes that are sitting there and can be erected for pennies on the dollar, right? But you say there's no space to put those, well, that's a permitting issue, right?
Yeah,
Well, who
we
controls the
we the
permitting process?
people.
Right? The elected officials, right? And so if there's no political will to do that, then we need to put the people in that say, you know what, we are going to change how we permit. where we're going to allow these spaces to exist, because the most important people, or the most important thing that we value the most, is human life. And we're going to address those four things: water, food, shelter, companionship.
And maybe power and communication with that, because those are things that we have to do. But you don't you arguably don't need them to survive or to live. But power gives you heat and light and the ability to cook. But so does a stove with wood. But there's all kinds of arguments about that too. And I'm rambling. I'm sorry. Um, but the point here is we can do a lot of things, but we have to do them together. And the Kitsap Resiliency Project is all about that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So bring yourself down and talk to us. It's not, we are not going to lead this. You are going to lead this. You are going to own this. We just help facilitate that conversation so that we can find the human commonalities that we can all agree on. And G2 will be there kicking me in the butt to make sure I do it right.
One of my very favorite quotes: access without support is not opportunity. That's Vincent Tinto. Let me type that in a little bit better.
Okay.
And when you think about that, you have to do some analysis and say, hey, are we providing access to people, right? And if you are, that's great. But if there's not support that is centered around that, because the skills were never there, the skills need to be recalibrated, whatever the case may be, then it's really not an opportunity. And so oftentimes we're doing these things and we're not doing the calculus. So there's all types of access, but there's no support to go along with that access. So it's really not an opportunity. And then it's like, well, if these lazy people just did this and just did that, then they would be okay. But we're not really looking at it. So we need to take stock of what it is we're doing, what's effective, what can we do better, what do we need to reject, and flip this thing on its head.
Hey, Marwan, I have an interesting idea that just came to me.
I love it.
So you do this little podcast thing and you do the conduit and you do G2. And I know that a lot of us drive people that are unhoused who work full time, trying
Mm-hmm.
to get their life back into them. What if we start highlighting those stories so that people start getting the idea that it's not lazy people, it's people who lack opportunity?
You know what? That'd be interesting. I actually have not had uh, a someone who is experiencing uh, homelessness on in a while, but that is the purpose of this platform: is to elevate the voiceless, or the thought that isn't common or accepted.
Hmm. And so maybe we need to get that in front of people to let them know that, yeah, it's not lazy people trying that are unable or not willing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but they have no boots.
So, are you proposing G2 taxi cab confessions? They're on the podcast while they're getting a ride. That'd be pretty
Uh,
interesting.
maybe there's a lot of people we talk to that are actually quite articulate, that are unhoused, that work and are trying to get back on their feet, but are finding trouble finding opportunity. Maybe those are stories we're telling.
The average ride's probably been 20 minutes anyway. Yeah, that could be something
Yeah.
interesting. G2 taxi cab confessions.
What are they? Well, they have carpool karaoke. Maybe this is going to be, carpool confessions. Yeah.
Well, I'm all for innovation, you know.
Yep. So anyway, those are my thoughts for today, and I know we're a little earlier than usual, but we kind of hammered this one. I think that, I don't want to get on the choir thing where I'm talking about let's get together and have these conversations, but I think that we need to stay on let's get together and have these conversations, because it's not going to get better until we do.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think it's important. Again, and it's important because you have to either calibrate, because you've never been calibrated, You don't have an understanding. You think you know what you think you know, or you need to be recalibrated, right? And that goes for us that are in this space. So I was just mentioning recently with an organization. I think we're looking at applying for a grant or a contract or something along those lines. And so as an organization, you say, hey, I see a problem, right? That's what business is to fill a void that exists. So we say, hey, there's this void out there and we want to fill it. And we think we're a good match for that. Well, if you're going to do a SWOT analysis, which you should, right? And that's your internal strengths and weaknesses measured against the external opportunities and threats that exist, right? Part of that is, who is your customer? Who is your client? Who are you serving? Did you have a conversation with them? Which is why I love the community needs assessment that KCR has pushed out there, and you hear us talk about a lot, because you have to hear from the people that are impacted, right? In order to make the change, their voice has to be at the table. And so a lot of times we end up doing things with, the purest of hearts, but we do it in absence of the people that we're actually trying to serve. And that is something that we need to do a lot more of.
Yeah, voices need to be raised, and there are a lot of people that don't feel that they have a voice. And actually, it's kind of interesting. In our process, we talk about hearing somebody's story being the greatest gift you can give somebody. Do you all? I'm pretty sure all of us have this. Is people we know that never shut up, that just keep saying the same things over and over and over again until we're ready to pull our hair out. So let me hypothesize this. What if those people just don't feel heard, and they won't feel heard and cease telling the same story over again until you take the time to let them run through their entire story? And in there might be kernels of understanding about who they are and how to begin a dialogue that will make your relationship far richer than it is right now. Oh my God, I sound like a relationship guru. Um, but it's true. You need, people who talk all the time and never run down is because they're not feeling like they're being heard. And therefore they don't feel validated. And you need to be able to listen them into silence and try to hear what they're saying, because there's going to be a kernel in there that you can build a relationship on.
What I think is important about that, and there's two sides to every coin, and I'm very hyper aware of that, right? That there are some negative impacts of the unhoused on people who are housed and businesses, right? Whether it's safety or health or just whatever the things are, right? I mean that's true also, and
Bodies.
so we get pitted against each other, and it's like, this is a problem, they are a problem, they need to be removed, I don't feel safe, right? My business can't thrive. This is there's kids, right? There's drugs, there's alcohol, there's domestic violence, there's mental health, right? These things all exist, right? And not taking anything away from that, but how are we actually going to solve the problem? But if you're a NIMBY, not in my backyard, it's like, okay, so it's not in your backyard, it's in your neighbor's yard. And your neighbor happens to be, half a mile down the street. It's still in your backyard. You still have to deal with it. And it's a growing issue. So it might be better to solve the issue, to all come together and stamp this out, right? Stamp it out.
Or provide opportunities so it builds itself out.
But it's festering, right? And it's growing. And what's happening is folks are, again, we looked at the statistics, right? Many of these folks are not substance abuse users, right? But that gets developed. And even still, not at the numbers from the polling, right? It was 1 in 4, right? So 25%, then it went up to 33%. So one in three. I mean, think about the fortitude that it takes to go through being unhoused in these elements and be part of the 66%. Like, holy shit.
Yep.
That's
So yeah,
powerful.
it is. And I was unhoused for a year and a half with my family. And we made do, but it was the most painful time in my life. And did I come out of it completely mentally intact? I'll let you guys judge, but it was the hardest, most painful time in my life. And I had to swallow a lot of people's attitudes while I was trying to figure out how to recover from it.
I didn't know you before, but you ain't right, Mark.
Well,
I couldn't help myself.
I can't argue with that, but I'm not
Oh.
wrong either.
Sometimes you just tee it up there so perfectly, I have no choice but to just, knock
Yep,
it down.
is true. Anyway, um, let's be a little human. Let's take it to our churches. Let's take it to our community, and let's bring it to each other and talk it through and figure out. Because you know something? I truly believe there is nothing on earth that we can't solve if we talk together. Because we
Right.
each bring our own perspective and experience to the table that no one else shares.
How about this for radical? Whether you're agnostic, atheist, or whatever, be your own church.
Mhm.
You don't have to be an organization. You don't have to be an institution. Be your own church. Be your own salvation and shelter for someone else. We're so
Okay.
powerful.
We are. We are powerful alone and we are powerful together. We are more powerful together. I sent you a video link, so you're gonna have to put your fair use thing up, and
All right.
it's just a 30-second piece, from 1 minute and 16 seconds, probably to about a few seconds past that. But it's one of the best descriptions I have ever heard of religion and God, and it's to set this up from the television series Daredevil. Matt Murdock, who is blind superhero, is a devout Catholic, and he's talking to a nun at the church at the end of one of the seasons, and he was talking about his own anger and what the priest who had just recently died had to say about God's will or God's view of the world.
1 minute and what?
It's from 1 minute and 16 seconds,
16 seconds. Okay.
and you'll know when it ends. When he finishes the discussion or description.
All right. Fair use, everyone. Man, you got me playing Disney. Oof, I'm gonna get canceled.
Oh, can't hear it.
Still can't hear it?
I can't hear it.
All right, hold on. Let me fix the
Is it
volume.
because I'm in studio or
No.
okay?
I just gotta change something on here. Oh, baby, it's cold outside. Baby, it's cold outside. Mm-hmm. All right. Why can't you hear that? That's interesting. You don't hear that at all, huh?
Nope.
Hmm. All right.
I,
Interesting. That's all right. We got an app for that. Oh, that should definitely be working. Okay. How about now?
nope.
All right.
And I'm wondering it's because this is the first time I've actually been in studio with you as opposed to coming in through the link. And it's the first time I couldn't hear your thing when you did the claps and the cheers either. I'm not
Oh,
hearing any.
really?
I'm not hearing any of that.
You didn't hear any of that?
Nope.
Well, I would say, sir, that is not on you. That is probably on my system. Now,
Okay.
why that's happening, I don't know, but I
Well,
will fix it.
I have seen it, so go ahead and play it for the folks, and then we can talk about it.
Well, Terry, let me know. Can you hear it?
Anyway, he told me.
No, I can hear now.
Yeah, that's because it's coming on my regular speakers. All right,
Okay.
let me.
I never forgot.
Okay, good.
He was pretty angry at God and bitter towards his world. And how could a loving God blind me? Why? Anyway, he told me God's plan is like a beautiful tapestry. And the tragedy of being human is that we only get to see it from the back. With all the ragged threads and the muddy colors, we only get a hint at the true beauty that would be revealed if we could see the whole pattern on the side, as God does.
That's pretty much it.
Anyway, I've been thinking a lot about it recently because.
All right, so go ahead and recap that for us.
So, whether it's religious or spiritual or reality or life, I think that it's a very apt statement that we as humans don't get to see the whole beautiful picture of how everything connects and is beautiful. We get to see the backside where we get little bits and pieces of threads and unfinished work and some muddy colors, but we get some glimpses of what the whole pattern can be. And I think the problem is that um, we can't perceive what that pattern is. We fail to use our imaginations these days. We are trained out of using our imaginations, out of asking the questions that allow us to see more of the tapestry. And if we could see more of the tapestry, maybe we could connect better with each other and maybe stop doing things that are damaging the planet and our fellow man. And maybe we can look at these giant machines we've constructed called corporations and maybe start thinking about how we can reprogram them to better support our humanity and our planet. Now, you can take it as religious, you can take it as spiritual, you can take it as just the way things work. But there's a lot out there, and we need to start understanding how the dots connect, and we need to start understanding how all of us are connected in one way or another.
Facts. Facts. Well, I think that's the last word. We're right at our time.
All right.
Your hour is up, sir.
You
All right,
can't put
everyone.
another quarter in the box?
Well, next week you can.
Okay.
So I hope you've enjoyed this hour of Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. What episode was this, Mark?
41.
41. Shout out for 41. All right, so we will be back next week with episode 42, Lord willing. And we have 1 hour before our conversation with housing, with KCR and Bremerton Housing Authority. So hopefully you will tune in an hour, get yourself a snack, go back to work, do whatever you're doing, and rejoin us in an hour. And then tonight is also City Council. So we will be here all day. You know how Wednesdays go. This is what we do. But for Mark Boatwright Frost, I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. See you next time.